Oh, well.
Hi, Bill. How are you?
Good morning. Just fine. Thank you. I hit something here. I don't know what. Oh, well.
Zoom is always an adventure. It's sort of, you never quite know what it's going to bring. All right, Alan, you want me to start with the script?
Yes, please.
Okay, welcome. I am State Senator Tom Sherman from District 24, encompassing the 11 beautiful towns down here on the seacoast. Today, we will be conducting a regular meeting for the Commission to study environmentally triggered chronic illness. Before we get started, I'll read through a checklist to ensure that the meeting we are holding is in compliance with the right to know law. As chair of the Commission to study environmentally triggered chronic illness, I find that due to the state of emergency declared by the governor as a result of COVID-19 pandemic, and in accordance with the governor's emergency order number 12 pursuant to executive order 2020-04 and its extensions, this public body is authorized to meet electronically. Please note that there is no physical location to observe and listen contemporaneously to this meeting, which was authorized pursuant to the governor's emergency order. In accordance with the emergency order, I am confirming that we are, number one, we are providing public access to the meeting by telephone, with additional access possible by video or other electronic means. We're utilizing Zoom for this electronic meeting. All members of the committee and selected legislative staff have the ability to communicate contemporaneously in this meeting through this platform. And the public has access to contemporaneously watch or listen to the meeting on Zoom or YouTube and via phone by following the directions and links provided on the General Court website. Number two, we have provided the public notice of the necessary information for accessing the meeting in the Senate calendar. Number three, we are providing a mechanism for the public to alert the public body during the meeting if there are problems with access. If anyone has a problem, please email remote Senate, that's REMOTESENATE at leg.state.nh.us or call 603-271-3043. Number four, in the event the public is unable to access the meeting, it will be adjourned and rescheduled. Number five, please note that all votes taken during this meeting shall be done by roll call vote. Number six, finally, let's start the meeting by taking a roll call attendance. When each member states their presence, please also state where they are and if anyone else is in the room with you during this meeting, which is required under the right to know law. I'm going to pull up the roll call unless, Alan, you don't have that, do you? I have it up. Let me just go back. There it is. Okay, so we're going to go through the roll, and this is committee members from our web page. So please don't be insulted if I don't go in the appropriate order. I'm just going in the order on the web page. We're all equal, right? Starting Representative Salloway, if you would tell us where you are and if anyone else is in the room with you.
I am at home in my office and alone with the dog, but she is on mute.
That's great. Nancy Murphy, Representative Murphy. Is Nancy on the call? Representative McMahon.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. I am present. I'm at my home office and isolated.
Awesome. Thank you. Senator Bradley.
I had emailed Shannon to make sure that Senator Bradley had everything he needed this morning, but I have not heard back. He has the invite, and I'll resend it again right now.
Okay. Mike Wimsat from DES.
Good morning, Mike Wimsat. I'm here in my home office in Concord, and I'm alone.
Oh, Dan, I'm going to ruin your last name. Dan Zizek? Zizek?
Zizek.
Nice. I didn't do too badly.
Good morning, Senator Sherman. I'm at my home in Lee, New Hampshire, and I am alone.
Great. Margaret DiTullio.
Good morning, I'm present. I am at my office in Atkinson, New Hampshire, at Rockingham Family Healthcare, and I am alone in my office.
Representative Mooney.
Good morning, I'm at my home in Manchester and I'm alone.
Representative Woods.
Yes, I'm in Bow and in my study at my home, and I am alone.
Representative Nelson.
I am in my man cave in Brookfield, and I am alone.
Awesome. And I'm next, so I'm Senator Sherman, and I am on porch number 2, Zoom porch 2, and I am alone. Dr. Bush.
Morning. I'm in Concord in my office at the health department and in my own cubicle alone, but share this office space with one other colleague right now who's here.
Thank you. Amy Costello.
Hi, present in Dover, New Hampshire, and alone.
Robert Timmons.
Good morning. I am at my office at Exeter Hospital, and I am alone.
And Mindy Mesmer.
Good morning. I'm Mindy Mesmer, coming to you from Rye, New Hampshire, and my office where I am alone.
Great. And that's the roster that I have. Is there anyone I missed who is a part of the committee?
Senator Sherman, Representative Murphy just let me know that she's running a little bit late, coming off of a Criminal Justice Committee commission meeting.
Okay. So when she joins, we'll put her in as present. So we have a quorum, and if you go to the agenda, the first item on the agenda is the report from DHHS. Katie, are you giving that?
Yes, morning. I think Mike and I can probably share that, but I can start just right as dictated by the legislation. We submit these reports every 6 months, I believe. And so September 1 came around already. So we submitted our third progress report to the commission. Hopefully everyone that was circulated and folks have been able to review that, but I thought that Mike and I could just walk through that with you this morning, and then we can have some time for discussion as time allows. As you might imagine, I think it's important to note, especially from the DHHS perspective, that due to the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic, this report was very brief. It does include a summary of sort of ongoing projects from DHHS and DES, but the reality is in the last 6 months, many staff have been reassigned to support the pandemic and COVID response activities. And so some progress has been delayed for sure on certain projects, which we can talk more about. But we still have lots to report, and work does move forward. Non-COVID work does move forward. And so I am scrolling through the document. If you're following along with me, I'm at the bottom of page 2. We have a summary there of sort of what's required in these reports. And then starting on page 3, just a series of updates. And I don't know if it's worthwhile to read through these exactly, so I will just do my best to give a brief summary. If people have questions, feel free to raise your hand or stop me. As I mentioned, we've been actively responding to the COVID pandemic. At this point, DHHS staff largely have been working remotely, but still able to connect with partners and collaborators using many new tools. We are continuing to participate with Dartmouth on an effort to develop PFAS-related materials. There's an amendment going through the contracts unit at this point to work with the Dartmouth Cancer Registry. You may recall that the governor allocated or appropriated some funds that now are utilizing the New Hampshire Drinking Water Groundwater Trust Fund dollars to enhance the state work related to environmental and childhood related cancers. So there are many objectives part of this contract. Some of the funding will cover a literature review of environmentally related childhood cancers, analysis of radiological monitoring data, convening of experts in childhood cancer via a conference, reanalysis of some childhood cancer data in New Hampshire and nationally, and some information gathering from families of children affected by cancer so that we can better understand their needs and inform future program planning. We have some exciting new collaborations. DES and DHHS have successfully applied for 2 collaborative grants and have been awarded those grants. One of them is the ATSDR Apple Tree Grant that you might be familiar with. There are sort of 2 components to that grant. One is conducting site investigations at hazardous waste sites around the state that are identified as priority sites, and then working with communities on outreach and education, as well as a new part of the grant that is supporting the safe siting of childcare facilities and trying to incorporate environmental health criteria into the siting of those facilities. The second is a grant focused on environmental health capacity building. And particularly this first round was focused on well water quality, sort of data integration and using data to drive action and policy. And so that will focus on integrating data from the Public Health Laboratory and DES to essentially build a well water quality dashboard that could then be used to target outreach and education across the state. And so those 2 projects are getting off the ground. I know in the past, we've talked a lot about the biomonitoring trace project. So we included the bottom of page 3, a bit of just a specific update. I think many of you have already heard this update sort of from other places, other commissions you're on or other work that you're doing, but that study is complete. And we continue to summarize that data. We hope that in the next few weeks to months, hopefully by the end of the calendar year, to have the final participant summary report and be able to disseminate that to all of the study participants. At which point I've mentioned, and so Senator Sherman, I think it would be great to try to coordinate a presentation from the biomonitoring team at some point when they're ready to share the results with the sort of multiple environmental health commissions. We also hope eventually to make this data easily accessible on the Wisdom data portal, but that will take some additional months to put together. I think at this point I can hand it over to Mike to give an update on the DES side of things. Oh, or we should pause for questions for the HHS side, perhaps. I see Mindy raising her hand.
Thank you.
Senator Sherman, I don't know your preference there.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Let's take questions. Mindy, do you have?
So the application for the well water grant, that's a great thing. I'm so happy to see that. Do you have any idea when that will be awarded and how much that may bring in?
So it has been awarded. The project date was September 1st. And unfortunately, there were 2 components to that grant. Component A focused on the data integration. Component B was really more the outreach and education piece. And we were only awarded about $50,000 component A. So the good news is it's a 5-year award. And this kind of formalizes the partnership at least. And so I'm still optimistic that even though that is not a lot of money, that we can really do a lot because it's already a shared priority and we already have programs working on this. And so
Katie,
that started September 1st. It's a 1-year award, but with the opportunity to expand, renew for up to 5 years.
Katie, was that the one I wrote a letter? Was that with Dr. Ali?
Yes. Yep. So,
right. Okay.
Yep. Dr. John Ali, the toxicologist with DES, he's a part of both the ATSDR Apple Tree Grant and this new, what I'll call the NCEH capacity building grant focused on water quality.
Mindy, I'm sorry, go ahead, Mindy.
Yeah. Similarly, the other 2 grants, the funding from CDC for the Comprehensive Cancer Control Program with regard to the registry, and then the other one, the Apple Tree, can you just give us some numbers on those? What the funds were allocated?
So the Apple Tree Grant, I don't have the exact budget in my mind. I think it's about $400,000 that supports that project. And I did, sorry, I didn't mean to, but I did skip over sort of an important piece, perhaps, that CDC has actually reduced the funding awarded to HHS for SFY 21 for the Comprehensive Cancer Control Program. And so there are some active discussions there around what the impact of these reductions will be and how to maintain, a strong cancer registry and all support ongoing program activities. I don't have a specific number there, Mindy. I can certainly reach out to the cancer program and ask for specifics around the cuts that they're experiencing.
And one more, how much is the Groundwater Trust Fund allocating for the pediatric cancer?
So I believe that the governor's appropriation was $500,000.
Right, okay.
And but that is only a one-year award that expires, this fiscal year.
And I'm vice chair of the Groundwater Trust Fund Commission. And when that came through, it was strong support. So the other is on the cancer registry. Katie, refresh my memory. Didn't we lose our, what was it, the oncologist that was on that? Was that because of funding reductions over the last 5 years as well?
I cannot speak to the staffing at the registry. I'm happy to go back and ask. I know there was a staff retirement. I don't know if that's what you might be referring to, but I can go ask for sort of the impact that the program and the registry are experiencing as a result of
I can't remember his name. There was an oncologist attached to the registry. The concern I have is that this isn't the first resource reduction or funding reduction for the registry, and just especially for the legislators on the phone call as we come into a budget year. There's a point at which the utility and the ability of the registry to provide DHHS with meaningful information is really undermined by the lack of funding. And so, Katie, maybe you could get back to us, especially as the commissioner is looking at funding requests for her budget, to make sure we're not crossing that threshold, because I mean, of all the chronic illness or tools in public health we have, the cancer registry is one of the, I would think it would be one of the most important. And I worry about these continued reductions that result in reduction in service. I know how creative DHHS is in making up funding reduction, lost funding, but there's a point at which the registry, we have to keep the registry robust enough to be able to answer the queries like the cancer cluster and those kind of things. So,
I couldn't agree more. And so I will take it back to the cancer program. And I agree, though, the aligning of priorities, from our division and the commissioner and the department with the legislature, there's perhaps some opportunity there. So I will.
Yeah, and we have, we have at least, I think there are at least 6. I haven't counted legislators on this call, and I know Senator Bradley will understand, and Nancy, of course, will too, Nancy Murphy. So it's just, you have a lot of support here for the registry, and I just worry as I see it being potentially underfunded and losing some of its capacity to answer critical questions. Okay, any other questions for Dr. Bush? Okay, thank you, Katie, that was awesome. And we may have more questions after Mike gives his part. So Mike Wimsatt.
Yes, good morning, everyone. So the specific contributions to this report from DES are summarized, I guess, on page, well, I don't know if there's a page number, but right around page 5. First of all, the first topic is the distribution of filter pitchers to vulnerable populations. That's the title. This is a project that's been funded by the New Hampshire Drinking Water Groundwater Trust Fund. And I think we've spoken a little bit about this at prior meetings of this commission. And in the absence of basically what this project is to provide filter pitchers that are capable of effectively treating drinking water for mothers who are pregnant mothers and mothers of young infants who may be exposed to arsenic contamination. And this is a project that's in concert with the state's Women, Infant, and Children program, the WIC program. And so we were underway, we had a contract, and we expected very early on this summer to be distributing these pitchers to women through the clinics. Unfortunately, with the pandemic and the in-person clinic visits really being curtailed, we got a little wrapped around the axle on it. We had to go back and amend the contract, but that's been done. And so this month, we should be rolling out that through a series of remote communications and mailings. And one of the big focuses of the program is to ensure that these women and their families are educated on the hazards associated with drinking water when it's contaminated with arsenic and the potential health effects associated with that. So we're very excited about this. We think it's going to be, it's really a pilot program at this point, but we think it'll lead to a lot of good education and hopefully a larger program that will really ensure that the most vulnerable populations, pregnant women and young mothers, are getting clean, safe drinking water during those vital periods. So hopefully at our next meeting, we'll be able to update you on sort of the numbers of kits we got out there and how the project is working. And I can either take questions on that now, or I can go on to the second one and then take questions at the end. Dr. Sherman, you're muted.
I love technology. Why don't we let you finish, Mike, and then we'll go back through it. I just remembered one thing though, Mike. This is a, sadly and really unfortunately, Senate commissions do not have staffing. So has anyone been taking minutes at this point?
Senator, also just again, I have the recording for this. So if whoever does decide that they want to go back and transcribe notes, I will be able to give them the recording of this.
You remain a god in my eyes. Thank you so much. We'll do that. We will figure out a way to get that transcribed so everybody can breathe a sigh of relief, because nobody's going to get their finger pointed at them as the scribe, and we will somehow get this transcribed. So go ahead, Mike. Thank you. And let's go back to the second part.
Sure. So the second topic is the statewide private well sampling initiative. And again, this is a program funded to DES from the Drinking Water and Groundwater Trust Fund. It's a project we've talked about at this commission before. I'm happy to say, on the one hand, we're virtually done with this, but not quite. Basically, this is about 500 drinking water well samples that were taken, or that were planned to be taken from randomly selected homes, residences across the state. Really the first time we've ever done a statewide evaluation and assessment of drinking water quality. Very large number of analytes that we selected for, so we got a tremendous amount of data. We're very excited about it. We got a little bit hampered by the pandemic in that in most cases, we were already underway before the pandemic. We did a lot of sampling. We still had more to do when the pandemic started, and we had to restrict our sampling to homes where there was no in-home treatment. And so we could just get a sample from an outside tap without going in and getting staff and homeowners exposed to each other. And unfortunately, we had about 20 homes out of the ones we selected that had in-home treatment, which meant that, and when you're doing this, you want to get both a sample from the, you're really looking at the water quality. So you want to get influent sample before treatment and then one after treatment, which means you need to go into a home to do that. So there's still about 20 homes that we've not yet gotten samples from. And we're trying to evaluate, how soon we might be able to do that and whether to just sort of curtail things at this point, because we really want to get this data analyzed and reported on. Another really exciting thing that we did with this is that it happened to be happening contemporaneously with this biomonitoring study, the TRACE study that Katie mentioned. And so we were actually able to go into every single home that had been randomly selected for the trace study and combine that blood sampling of the family members with a drinking water sample, which is really powerful to be able to get that data concurrent with, current water quality data for the folks who are drinking the water in the home. So we do have that, and I know that so both of these studies are kind of, I think, right at the cusp. I know that the work is being done right now on the DHHS is doing the data analysis and getting ready to report on the trace study. And then we are, sort of trying to figure out these last few samples and then get going with the data analysis and compilation for the statewide drinking water initiative. But it's really exciting. It's a terrific opportunity. And I think really, frankly, I don't know if any other states have been able to do something like this. So part of it, we benefit from our relatively small size and the fact that we were able to get a substantial grant from the trust fund. So we're excited, and we'll be looking forward at a future meeting of this commission to providing a full report on that.
That's exactly what I think many of us who have been with this commission all along, and I think everyone is looking for, is that combination of really understanding impact of contaminants on blood sampling and on the residents. So that's an amazing opportunity. Mindy, you have a question?
Yes, I do. So kind of from the previous question, but now it's good to add this to what topic you just talked about. I noticed that there was 16 parts per billion lead maximum in the private wells, and I wondered if those pitchers would handle lead in addition to arsenic. And I know SB 247 talked about the need to sample schools, drinking water at schools, and I wondered if we had an update on any of that information and what potential there may be for going back and trying to look at the appropriate level of exposure to lead in drinking water, especially with respect to children.
Mike, do you have?
Sure. So as to the first question, I'm not, I never want to answer when I'm not certain, and I'm not certain about the pitcher's ability to filter for lead. So I can easily find that out and circle back and let you know. Question about drinking water in schools. Not sure that we have a current effort to do that. I can check in with the Drinking Water and Groundwater Bureau. As far as safe level, I mean, the thing, I'm not the expert on this, but my understanding is there has never been determined to be a safe level of lead. No one's willing to put a number on that. And the general, I think, consensus of the toxicology community is that, no detection of lead is where you want to be.
And I can just add, I believe with Bill 247 and like the testing of schools and daycares, that if they found higher than 15, they were mandated right under the bill to remediate, but that anyone with greater than 1 was eligible for the 50% remediation costs sort of refund. So the goal is to get any lead out of the water with that bill, particularly in schools and daycares where we know children, high-risk population could be exposed. So.
Katie, do you know who's following up on that effort, or who has the responsibility for it?
Yeah, that actually falls in DES actually. So in the water division, and Cindy Clevens, who's a water treatment engineer. So her team is working on following up with the schools and the remediation. And similar to the pitcher project, I believe there is a contract in the works that would have a third-party vendor then support that work going forward, sort of the tracking of the testing as well as the allocation of the remediation funds to support that work.
Great. Maybe Mike, maybe you could check in with Cindy and answer those two questions, pitchers and lead, and where we are with the school lead effort. Is that okay?
Absolutely. I can look into that, and I'll get an email back to you.
Okay, great. Thanks. Any other questions for Mike or for Katie at this point? I had a couple, but I don't know. I think they would be Katie directed. Actually, one of them I already asked, which is to have a better understanding of where we're getting towards that threshold on the funding for the cancer registry. That makes me very nervous. And then it sounds like my other question, the collaborative grant, those have both been, that has actually happened, except for that one part, the education piece. Is that correct?
Right, we only were awarded component A of the collaborative grant.
Right, right. I didn't write a strong enough letter, I guess.
Yeah, you know, and to be honest, we just reviewed it and the weaknesses didn't seem strong enough not to warrant the award. So who knows?
Right.
But like I said, I think that it sets the foundation for this work, and thinking about the charge of this commission, you know, we may not be right now implementing, you know, 21st century data systems, but I think we have several pilot projects that are really fulfilling the mission of this commission. And sort of in the background, the Department of Health and Human Services and DES are working on IT solutions that continue to support this work, right? So I just want to really convey, and we didn't get into that detail because I feel like those conversations have been kind of put to the side in the face of COVID, but there is big data infrastructure work happening sort of on the side or behind the scenes. And then we have these pilot projects that really demonstrate the integration of data. And eventually we'll have this new enterprise-wide business intelligence system is what we're talking about here, the EBI within the health department, where these data can then live. And DES has their similar database, One Stop, which continues to undergo improvements. And so
is there
project by project, we're sort of optimizing these data integration and data flows. And so that part, maybe we didn't speak to the large infrastructure piece of this, but we really highlighted, I think, the specific pilot projects that are demonstrating this, but that larger work is also happening and could be worthwhile to sort of circle back to an update.
Just thinking the same thing. For those of us who were on the original commission, we did a pretty deep dive into looking at data resources within the department and found that there was a lot of opportunity for improvement, but also that the department was doing a self-assessment on data and thinking towards their next upgrade. A lot of systems that didn't intercommunicate, isn't that correct, Katie? And then one of the goals, and I think it sounds like you're thinking this way, is allowing some degree of integration automatically between the data in DHHS and the data in DES.
Yeah, I think the trick is always, getting data within one agency to talk to each other is challenging enough. And so if we can both optimize it, then the interconnection is easier. I think those actual automations between agency data sets is probably a longer way off. But between the opioid sort of crisis and the need to stand up a robust dashboard to be able to track that data, and now same with COVID, I think many of you, I hope you have seen the COVID dashboard that's out there. So this is all built on this new infrastructure system that we then, have access to going forward. And so many of you may remember some presentations I gave previously on the Wisdom data portal. And so Wisdom is undergoing a major transition to this new platform. And that continues to get a little bit delayed due to COVID, but hopefully, I think perhaps when that first round of transition is final, it would be a good opportunity to bring that team in and share sort of where they are. And because just like the opioid dashboard end, right, we're integrating death data, hospital data, right, all of these major data systems that we've talked about previously. And so then we have that system in place to build out environmental health focused content.
And we have some external systems. I don't know, Amy, if, I don't want to put you on the spot, but you have a lot of experience with these systems at UNH, correct? Or am I wrong?
We analyze the claims data. The claims data has been incorporated in the ABI. Right. We're actually at UNH, we're getting a regular feed of the Medicaid data now. Right. And continue to analyze, but I don't know that we have anything that's unique to UNH and not already incorporated in the EBI.
Can you just remind us all about what EBI stands for, just so that,
I think Katie just said it better than I did. The electronic
Enterprise Business Intelligence.
that's it.
Enterprise
Okay.
Business Intelligence, yeah. So this was a major effort with Deloitte and DHHS over the course of last year. And they brought on, and Katie, you know, obviously steer me, but they prioritized data sets to incorporate in the EBI. And I believe most of the major ones in public health have now been incorporated. So claims, I believe the vital records in there now. Is cancer registry in, Katie?
I'm not exactly sure what's in and what's out, but that's certainly all on the list to get in.
Yeah. So we could probably bring forward a maybe a status report of the development of that. But, you know, I think that's going to afford a lot of opportunity to do many of the things that we had contemplated in January around how do we have a system that can help us see what's on the horizons and identify what we don't know.
Okay.
Right.
Senator?
Yes.
Can I jump in on this?
Absolutely.
This is, first of all, it's wonderful to see you all. You've truly been missed. Secondly, I think that the interim reports that have been put together are an excellent beginning. There are a couple of pieces that are coming along that get interesting. So we've done a credible job of beginning to gather data and to integrate that data into a meaningful whole. And one of the charges to this commission is to use that data to make recommendations. Before the House Committee on Health and Human Services, about a week and a half ago, there was a bill, I believe it was House Bill, I think it was 1538, might have been 1528, and I apologize for not having the number exact, which called for a commission to use data to implement an education program for practitioners at all levels on environmental risk and chronic disease. The recommendation of the committee was no further legislative action, but to remand that project to this Commission on Environmental Risk and Chronic Disease. And in fact, that is part of our charge, but it's part that we haven't yet thought about. Following up on, Dr. Bush and Mr. Winsett and Mindy Messmer, and also pulling in a comment from Brian Mooney, this is a great opportunity for us to begin to contemplate, to begin to plan how we might use this data as we solidify it to educate practitioners at all levels on the need to assess environmental risk in their clinical contacts and finding a way to take their results and integrate that into our database. Does that make sense?
Yes, and you remind me, Representative Soloway, for the purposes of transcribing this this recording, when anyone starts out speaking, please state your name. I know it's going to sound a little redundant.
I'm sorry.
No, I didn't think of it until you're already talking, but I know your voice very well. So, but that was Representative Soloway, and that was a great point. And I love it when we get tasked with more tasks. But that sounds like a natural. It doesn't sound like we're quite ready for it, but putting it on the radar, as this chronic disease database and exposure databases, DHHS, DES are created or mature, then I think it would be natural to use that data to educate practitioners on environmental risk. I'm just reminded that I'm trying to remember how recently this. Oh yeah, just last week I had another patient. This is a constituent who told me about their new diagnosis of ulcerative colitis, and lo and behold, they'd spent almost their entire career at Pease. So it's, it just, when you think of these exposures, that doesn't mean that the ulcerative colitis came from PFAS from the drinking wells at Pease, but we start thinking about, boy, these databases are the way we investigate these things. How do we know if it's significant or not, right? Representative Soloway, we have to have the statistics and the data available. Am I correct?
Oh, yes.
All right.
If I can make
and-
one just last statement that didn't fit into the report.
Yeah.
Just, there was a subgroup, I don't know if everyone remembers, but Mindy Mesmer, Amy Costello, and I had sort of met separately, getting to this point of there's the surveillance and the data, but then what about when there's a community concern and making sure that those kind of reconcile one another? And so we had reviewed the state's cancer concern investigation protocol and sort of begun to think about adapting that to be a larger, more broad environmental health concern investigation protocol. So essentially, if you, a practitioner, were concerned about number of cases, or a concerned community member was concerned about water quality in their region, right? How do they get to us at the health department or at DES? And so I didn't put that into the report because I hadn't had a chance. I don't really know the formality of having a subcommittee sort of meet again, but I wanted to just make sure that that was in the record. And really, while I had an opportunity to sort of touch base with Mindy and Amy here, that we should go back to that document and perhaps at a future meeting, bring that to the group.
Yeah, and also, if that subcommittee, since you all still exist, the subcommittee still exists. So if you were interested, everybody is, I think everybody on this call is probably flat out in their other lives right now. But it's a great point, and it's something that fits in with what Representative Soloway just talked about, which is education of practitioners and creating tools for practitioners as well. And that, I remember when we first started this commission, that was sort of one of our really exciting, big, hairy, audacious goals that I'm so thrilled that we're this much closer to it after only a few years. Is there more discussion on the report at this point?
I know
Anybody?
Representative Woods has.
Representative Woods.
Yeah, I'd just like to add a comment and sort of tack along with Representative Soloway's comments about education. The thrust of that was of 1538 was relative to PFAS. And in the context of the fact that also a number of us here are also on the PFAS Commission. And that our report is now coming out, or in the process of coming out. Integrated with that is the piece of education. So it seems like the pieces are beginning to gel. My sense is we're closer than one might think, in the sense that there's two parts to education. One is making the medical community, or in the broadest sense, aware of the problem. Once they have awareness, then they can be focused. When parameters for protocols come out, they'll be prepared to institute them. But if we wait until we really have data to provide for protocols, it just prolongs things and might even provide for some confusion. So to me, I think if we can step ahead, and the AMA is already doing that. I've looked into that, and there were two pieces of two resolutions which were brought together as one, passed by the House to recognize PFASs and the medical implications. So some of this is already underway, and I think if we can capitalize on that and push it forward in the state, I think it.
Just a reminder that if you're not speaking, if you could mute so that we can hear the speakers really well without feedback. That's a great point. We did talk very early on a few years ago about how information is disseminated. In fact, we had presentations on that in the early versions of this commission. by DES and by DHHS, and the other tool that's out there is Ben Chan's tool of being able to get information directly to practitioners. I was just looking at mine on COVID, my most recent note on COVID, but also there was I'm blanking on the name of it, but the mosquito-borne encephalitis. And so we get these bulletins on a routine basis from DHHS. All practitioners in the state get them. And we might think about at some point circling back in the spirit of what Representative Woods was just talking about and using that tool as an educational piece to update practitioners. I think I could be pretty accurate by saying that we really do, practitioners really do read those bulletins coming from DHHS. Yes, Gary.
Yes, I guess this is Gary Woods again. As a matter of fact, they're sort of on hold at the moment, but the New Hampshire Medical Society has already had discussions with a lot of the stakeholders about just how to accomplish that. And so I think that part can be picked up again fairly easily. And that was the thrust of what Representative Murphy's 1538 was directed.
Great. Any other comments at this point? Representative Nelson.
Yes, I'm just curious. I mean, is there any water made in bottling soda or bottled water, is that tested for any of this stuff?
Representative Mesmer, do you want to take that one, or is there anyone from actually, let's see if Mike has any feedback. Mike Wimsatt, are you able to answer that from a DES standpoint?
Well, actually, so with respect to the question about bottled water, that is actually regulated by the Department of Health and Human Services under the Public Services Division. But there's history on that PFAS is not currently required to be tested for. And that's something that I think folks have tried to think about.
Yeah, I think Representative Cushing had a bill in to require companies that were commercially providing bottled water for consumption by humans would have to do that testing. Before I get to you, Mindy, I just wanted to see if Katie knows any more about the DHHS testing. I saw you, Katie, when Mike mentioned DHHS, so I just wanted to
digging in. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'll follow Mike's lead here and not answer when I am not certain, but I can bring it back and ask around.
That'd be great. Mindy.
Mike, I was under the impression that water that was bottled in the state of New Hampshire had to comply with the MCLs. Is that not correct? I know the Cushing's bill was to look at interstate commerce for bottled water, but I thought all water originating in the state of New Hampshire had to comply with MCLs.
I'm not sure that's true. It's not required to be tested for all the things for which there are MCLs. That's one of the sort of, we just call it a little secret about bottled water. Everybody would buy it because they were concerned about their drinking water, but in fact, public drinking water is much more heavily regulated and controlled in terms of its quality. That's an issue that's still, I think, kind of being looked at. Just on the issue of PFAS, I do want to note that when we were really deep in the throes of dealing with the Southern New Hampshire PFAS problem, we did go out and sample a variety of bottled waters. Number one, we were providing bottled water to folks who were impacted, and we wanted to make sure that bottled water was clean, but we also went out and looked at some others. And while there was not a regulatory requirement for, at that time, for it to comply, we did reach out when we did discover one particular bottled water company that was above our, that had a concerning level. And actually that plant came offline, and then they since put on treatment to ensure that they could remove the PFAS effectively. So I think that's an area where, the public should be concerned about because a lot of us do rely on bottled water as our main drinking water source. And it's really not regulated in such a controlled fashion as public water systems are.
And it's not just PFAS with drinking water. It's all contaminants. I do remember Clark Frizey saying that the state tends to provide, I think it's Monadnock water. So that has tested clean if anybody wants to stay in New Hampshire. So Bill, you have a question?
Yes, how about soda? Since a lot of us, myself being one, drink a lot of soda. Where does the water come for that?
Good
and
question.
Is it tested?
I'll just answer that in a general sense. That is even less regulated than bottled water, I think. And what I will say is that a lot of water bottlers, as well as manufacturers who make drinks like soda and such, do use filtration because they're looking to control quality and the composition of the water for their consistency for their product. So like Monadnock water, one of the reasons that it tests clean is that it undergoes carbon filtration. And I think that's also true of a lot of soda bottlers and things like that. They're doing some kind of filtration fairly regularly, as part of their process. But as far as I'm aware, DES does not have any kind of a regulatory program governing soda. And I don't know, Katie, if DHHS gets involved with that or not.
I don't know. I'm jotting these all down to bring back. I actually sit in the Bureau with Food Protection and we're meeting at 1 o'clock. So as a Bureau, so
Right.
I can ask these
Senator,
questions.
This is Jeff Salloway.
Yeah,
If
hi,
I could
Jeff.
throw one piece into this. A while ago, I think it was almost a year ago, but I'm not sure. I went out to the Budweiser plant in Merrimack and asked pointedly about whether their water could pass a test for contamination from a variety of sources, including PFAS. And they assured me, as you would expect them to do, that their water went through a 17-stage filtration process, and it was absolutely clear. However, we have a number of breweries around the state that are boutique breweries. They're very small, and I'm sure they're using groundwater. And there's a real question as to how much checking they're doing and how much filtration they use. And Dr. Bush, if you could take that to your discussion this afternoon, the response might be quite interesting.
Yeah, I was just smiling as you were talking, Jeff, because I did all my training at WashU at Barnes Hospital. Of course, that's the home of Anheuser-Busch. And they used to draw off the Mississippi River. So I hope they went through 17 different. Okay. Well, Katie, you've got your work cut out for you. I think you might want to call the Liquor Commission as well.
Well, and just to clarify, I want to make sure I understand the real question. So sort of what are the standards for water used for bottled water, beer, soda,
right,
made in New Hampshire? But a separate question of what about then those same products that are sold in New Hampshire?
Yeah, and if you need a subcommittee on that, Representative Soloway and I would be happy to join you down at Throwback Brewery in Northampton. Go ahead, Mike.
After we do a water quality test.
That's right. That's right. Mike?
Yeah, and just to provide a little perspective, I think it's worth remembering that one of the reasons we are always so concerned about drinking water is that it is a really significant exposure pathway, because the assumptions we use is that 3 or 4 liters of water may be drunk per day from your drinking water source. And I'm just hoping that in the case of microbrew and soda, that level of exposure is not occurring for most people.
Well, remember, I'm a hepatologist, so I do have some patients who could probably do that. But I think that's a great point, Mike, and thank you for bringing that back up. Mindy.
Can I just make a comment on that?
Yeah.
That's true, but those sources of contamination, potential contamination, should be additive, because you'll drink
Right.
water, you'll drink beer, you'll drink whatever else. So those assumptions aren't always that comprehensive enough.
Yeah, and Mike, I don't know, is that publicly available, the work that you guys did testing the different waters, or is it not?
Yes, that was published in more or less in real time when we collected that data, which goes back about, 3 or 4 years now.
Would you mind sending that over to Aaron, who's my legislative aide, and we can get that out to people?
Sure.
That'd be great. Anything else on that topic? Mindy, I don't know if Rennie is reintroducing that bill. I don't think it was a victim of COVID. I think it was a victim of either the House or the Senate.
It was a victim of COVID.
Oh, was it? Okay.
Yeah. And I'm hopeful, I'm certainly going to ask him to resubmit it.
Right, okay.
I'm sure he will.
Okay, great. So we're at 11 o'clock, and this has been an awesome discussion, but I do want to pivot around. On the agenda, you'll see sort of where do we go from here? The first task that we have due November 1st is an interim report. And of course, the work that we've been doing has been sharply disrupted by COVID, and actually will continue to be so, because convening policy, convening commissions is not super simple, because we have a lot of competition for this. And I think the competition is going to become more fierce. Not allowed to go back to in-person visits in the new year once the session starts up. So does everybody understand what I'm saying? In other words, the capacity to have monthly meetings, I'll have to talk to Alan to see if we can continue that. But we may have to be thinking about subcommittees or being able to do side work. Still, we're subject to the rules, but we may be able to break into subcommittees and come back. That would be one way to get more work done between meetings of the entire commission. But we had talked about several different areas of moving forward, and we have one more, thanks to Representative Salloway, on the education piece on PFAS. But we had talked about, there was, and I apologize because I don't have a complete list. Let me get back to the agenda. It has some of the areas. So the drinking water quality study, which I think that Mike can tell us whether that is back in gear now that the suit has been vacated, or whether they're not connected. So we sort of have the idea of how do we move forward? We have a large number of different areas of interest represented here. And just to add one more, I sit on the 5G Commission. I'm vice chair of that. Pat Abrami is chair, and looking at the human impact of introduction of 5G. It has not been introduced in New Hampshire at this point, but the commission there's going to be a commission report and a minority report, but the bottom line is that many of us on the commission are clearly concerned about the impact of 5G on human and environmental health. And it would be something for us to potentially think about. This commission has been mentioned by that commission as a way to follow up on the commission recommendations. So I'm just giving us a heads up that is something that is of interest to the 5G Commission, to have this commission continue that work. We had talked about radon. Mindy brought up follow-up on lead. So I'm just going to open the floor for a few minutes for people to talk about where they see us going from here. The first, just to close the loop on our interim report, my plan would be to do a report since last November of each of the meetings, to include references to Katie's and Mike's report from today, and to say that we continue to be a work in progress. But what I'd like to get from today is where people would like to see us go, both in general and specific topics. And when I say specific topics, talking about things like radon or lead. In general, talking about practitioner education, intercommunication within departments and between departments. Where do you all see our future? Who would like to start? Representative Woods.
Oh, I'll pick up on your 5G since I'm there.
Yeah,
there as
that's
well.
right. I thought you'd want to say something.
My sense at this juncture, I think we should be, this commission should be attentive to 5G, but not necessarily active for the following reason. Depending upon how the report is A, fabricated, and B, who picks up on the elements of that report and moves forward independently by taking some of the suggestions and making an LSR and carrying it forward. So it may well be that all the dimensions that we might be looking for will be sort of taken care of. By the same token, if we're attentive, then this would be a perfect place to, if the ball gets dropped for whatever reason, a perfect place to sort of continue this.
And when you say continue this, do you mean assuming 5G is rolled out, then consider that almost as a contaminant?
Absolutely.
And be thinking about the chronic disease monitoring while Katie is developing her chronic disease monitoring,
right?
Perhaps, thinking about, well, let's say it gets rolled out in Manchester, being able to track, unfortunately, like so many other things, the impacts appear to be over the course of many years rather than something that we can easily measure. But being able to have that on the radar, so to speak.
It's quite variable. And I'm already in conversation with the State Medical Society, folks in California, as well as Massachusetts, which are formulating state legislation. And I'm trying to negotiate to get the AMA to take a position on 5G from the health perspective. So there are pieces that are already coming together. And I think if we as a commission can sort of just keep an eyeball as to what comes out of that commission, of the 5G commission, as well as what other avenues are being explored, to me, it would be a perfect place to pick up the ball if necessary.
Okay. Everybody comfortable with that? In other words, not actively involved at this point, but monitoring the situation. But also, again, I think it would fit in to our model of a new contaminant and then continuing to monitor the impact of that on possible chronic disease. Representative Soloway, do you have a comment? You're muted. Representative Soloway, you're muted.
Thank you.
There you are.
I speak with temerity because I know we have an accomplished physicist on this panel, but I did take the trouble to communicate with a radiation physicist on the issue of 5G, and I was laughed at because I was told that this is non-ionizing radiation and nothing to worry about. And Representative Woods, I think, will have more to say than I could possibly say.
Anyway, Representative Woods, do you want to comment on that, or?
Well, it's interesting that some of the work I was doing in 1964 as a physics major, as a senior project on quantum tunneling, I won't go into that, but has direct implications for the excuse me, RF interaction with the molecules and its subsequent consequences. And I have to laugh at the lack of basic quantum mechanical understanding at the molecular level for people who are making policy, through the FCC, who are dodging, are just a front for the industry, and some of the industry shills who claim to be physicists. And they are physicists, but how they can dress it up, it's truly mind-boggling.
Yeah, it's interesting because in my own personal experience, what Charlottesville has done is they've installed a massive amount of 5G on top of a condo that's full of old people like my dad. So I guess they're figuring it won't have a lifetime impact on them. Any other comments on 5G? Yes, Margaret?
My comment is not on 5G, more on the commission in general. I don't know.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yep. So I will state my bias up front, which is a clinician. My bias, of course, would be to have some part of this commission's work to educate clinicians, as really was already brought up by Representative Soloway and others this morning. I feel privileged to be on this committee representing the Nurse Practitioner Association because I get information that my colleagues don't have. And I've already integrated questioning and education around these issues with my own primary care patients who have the benefit of my attendance here. So I would hope that at least in part, this commission would in some way, and I'd be very willing to work on a subcommittee related to that if there are others that are interested, to in some part have a piece that incorporates increasing awareness in the clinical community to help start the process of educating patients around what needs to. I refer patients all the time to have their water tested through DHHS now, you know.
That's great.
Yeah, so that's all.
Thank you. Mindy.
And following on that, you know, the public education and awareness should also happen, and that will help inform clinicians. So unfortunately, Part B of that bill, of that grant was not approved, but I do think that there needs to be a campaign to educate people on how to talk to their clinicians about all these issues as well.
Good point. Dan?
Senator Sherman, I echo, first of all, your suggestion of subcommittees. I think that it would be an effective way to run this commission with periodic sort of group get-togethers to sort of keep everybody informed. And so I would echo that. As far as a specific topic goes, one that is near and dear to my heart and is fairly common practice where I live in around the seacoast is the use of animal waste on fields, and particularly with the confluence of 5 different rivers into an estuary. Animal waste runoff certainly has the potential to impact populations. I don't know whether any studies or this has been looked at in New Hampshire, but
we have had PFAS contamination, as Mike can tell you, from human waste that's spread over fields. I think is it East Kingston, Mike, where the septic was spread over fields by one of the septic tank pumper outers. I don't know what their job title is, but can you speak to the human and animal waste issue?
On the human waste side, yeah, in East Kingston, the Bodwell site, that was a site where basically, sorry about that. That was a site that managed a lot of waste, not for agricultural application, but actually managed a lot of that waste in a more concentrated way, and did so in violation of some permit requirements. So that had something of an outsized impact and did impact a number of nearby drinking water wells. At the same time, we have looked at other land application sites, and we have identified impacts to the groundwater quality around those sites, less so having actually impacted nearby drinking water wells. But that's definitely a concern because human waste, really what we're talking about is what we call biosolids or wastewater treatment sludge. And that, of course, is an agglomeration of not just, people flushing the toilets, but also manufacturing waste, commercial facilities that discharge to local sewer systems. So we do end up seeing because a variety of commercial products have used in the past PFAS compounds, and manufacturing facilities use those compounds, as we know, that ends up as a component of sludge in wastewater plants. So that's a concern. The piece on animal waste, I think we know less about. Certainly, there's a long history of dairy farms, for example, spreading manure on their hay fields and that sort of thing. That's been going on for years. The only experience or knowledge we have where, and this is more so in other states, in Maine in particular, where if biosolids, wastewater treatment plant sludges have been used on farm fields that are used for feed crops for dairy cattle, then there was a couple of examples in Maine where the milk from those cows has been impacted with PFAS contamination in a somewhat dramatic way at one facility in Kennebunk, Maine, which was in the news, more than a year ago. So we know that and there was probably some cycling going on at that site. So once it was in the cows, their manure was also being used on the fields, and that was probably putting some of that back and cycling back through into the feed for the cows. So that's a long ambling way of saying we don't really know much about straight up use of animal manures having an impact. That shouldn't really be an issue unless, in terms of PFAS anyways, unless there's been some way that the animal's feed has had PFAS introduced into it.
Yeah, and in terms of animal manure, I having owned a manure spreader, which as a gastroenterologist was a especially pleasurable event. The major risk of manure animal waste is infectious on drinking water. So when I was in rural Virginia, we would have patients come in with chronic diarrhea. You check their well and they'd either have E. coli or Giardia, typically E. coli in that setting that was causing the problem. But I don't know about animal waste, but certainly that, that is a great question. Katie, you have a thought on that?
Oh, I was gonna divert us back. So I will.
Wait, hold it.
If someone has a direct comment here.
Representative Soloway is waving his hand. Representative Soloway?
Jeff Soloway, we do have experience from other parts of the country. So in Chesapeake Bay, for example, we have nitrate runoff from the chicken farms. And that has produced a bloom of a bug called Pfiesteria pesci, which toxified Chesapeake Bay with a neurotoxin that literally was in a layer over the water, and the fishermen were affected by the neurotoxin. We have the Great Bay here in New Hampshire, and that represents a potential source of toxification. And it's the sort of thing that we really have to keep an eye on. And I don't think that there's any data on it.
Right. I go back to Katie. Yes, Katie.
Well, so that I was going to try to bring the conversations together, thinking about the report and how do we bring these somewhat disparate ideas together. And I would volunteer to try to put together some kind of conceptual map, perhaps, that goes back to the original charge of the commission. And I really see it around data, right? Sort of surveillance, core surveillance, the data integration then, and these data systems, right? The infrastructure piece. Then this two-way communication of how are we alerting public health or environmental officials, but and the public, but how can the public also communicate back with us about concerns, and then the education piece, right? So I'm volunteering, I guess, and perhaps our subcommittee that is working on this can kind of work on this together of these 5 big, right? The scope of this commission is huge. And
It is.
each of us could probably list 5 contaminants that we think are the most important, or 5 outcomes. And so I just encourage us to really think about creating the systems and the processes that allow us to respond to the next emerging concern. And if we can use the reports coming out this year, the biomonitoring report and the DES well water monitoring report, to help identify those water contaminants and those exposures that are the most unusual or the most critical to pay attention to in New Hampshire, to focus our efforts and build the systems, or at least make the recommendations that will allow us to build the systems. Then my hope is going forward, we would have these systems and processes in place to address I don't think it's realistic for this commission to address every single contaminant of concern for New Hampshire's citizens. We can create a system and a process that will let us do that better.
I think you just said that beautifully, Katie, that we could really end up deep in the weeds on each individual contaminant. But if what we come up with through this committee is a system that you identify a contaminant, say 5G or horse manure or something, something specific, but the system of how is that evaluated? How is that then incorporated? What is the next step in the system for looking for any chronic illness impact of that contaminant? Is everybody pretty comfortable with that idea? The reason I bring that up is I share Katie's concern that we could spend a lot of time on each individual contaminant. We had a wonderful presentation on radon, and we could spend multiple commission hearings on radon, or we could have a subcommittee spin off and do that. But if what we end up with is a system where when we see something like radon, lead, arsenic, our system automatically incorporates that into the assessment and evaluation. You do that assessment evaluation, and then you end up with an educational piece that is going out to both the public and practitioners. Also going to the legislators to see if there is further intervention needed, such as setting MCLs or otherwise. So one approach is for us to move forward thinking about making sure that those systems exist. Another approach, oh, hi, Nancy. You can say hi. Everybody say hi to Nancy. The other approach is to really be going and looking at each of the contaminants, and then also trying to look at the chronic illnesses. And I think that might be hard at a commission level, but I'm open. Am I summarizing what you said, Katie? Am I on board? Is that where you are too?
Yeah, yes. And I think the original 511 report did a good job identifying some of the key outcomes of interest. And I think these new reports coming out will help identify some of the key exposures of interest. And then if we think about building the systems, using those as the focus areas, so that when there's a new emerging contaminant or something that bubbles to the surface in the future, we have put these surveillance, data integration, communication sort of processes in place.
So maybe Katie, you and Mike and I can work together on generating the November interim report that captures that moving forward. But before we go any further, I want to make sure the whole commission is on board with this idea. So let me open that up to the rest of the commission and get some feedback.
Well, and I do think that this environmental health investigation protocol that Amy and Mindy and I had started working on has relevance here also,
right,
as this could be the conduit to how do we identify the thing we want to ask the next question about.
Right. Okay, Mike, you were going to say something?
Yeah, just to augment a little further what Katie said, I was actually just pulled up the SB 85 and looked through the charges, and there are more than 14 or 15 specific charges of the commission. And I think, it's expected to run no later than November 1 of 2024 when the final report is due. That seems like a long way away, but it's going to come fast. And there are a lot of charges there. I don't think among them is an expectation that this commission will go through a whole host of contaminants and run them to ground.
Right.
It's really broader than that, and it's sort of pulling back to a little bit higher elevation and looking at systems and how we ensure that, number one, the two departments are communicating and sharing their data effectively, but also recommending how the overarching system, which I admittedly don't know very much about when it comes to the public health monitoring and that sort of thing, how those systems work together to make sure that we collect as much information as available, make that available to the parties who need it. And I think that we should really probably, as often happens, go back and look at those charges and make sure that the work we're doing is leading us in that direction, which I think is what Katie was talking about when she talked about creating a map.
Amy?
Yeah, and I think, and maybe it's a matter of course in this meeting that we'll accept the minutes from January, but I think in the meeting in January, we did kind of go through the bill and identify the charges that would be related to the work that Katie and Mindy and I were doing. And to Mike's point, there are a lot of them, but many of them kind of cluster neatly into some of the activities that we've already identified. And so maybe reflecting on those minutes and the charges alongside the work that Katie's pulled together, we can see kind of what we have left.
Okay. Let me see. Anybody else have comments at this point? Did everyone get a copy of the minutes from January? I know Aaron sent them out, and Amy reminds me that we probably should go through the formality of accepting the minutes, but I'm going to hold off on that for a second because that takes a roll call. Any other comments? So what I see the interim report for November, I can talk to Alan. We can try to have a draft interim report. Hi, Alan. A draft interim report that we could then, toward the end of October, all sit down and discuss and finalize. If we could do one more meeting before November 1st, do you think that's going to be possible, Alan?
Yeah, I do. If you want to, we can talk offline about it and schedule.
Right.
But if you want to get a consensus as to when the group wants to meet, I can look and see what's available.
That'd be great. So how do people feel about, first of all, I think everybody can contribute to this. Looking at the minutes from January, the discussion today, Katie has offered to pull together perhaps a framework for that. What I would plan to do is maybe set something like October 15th for any submissions to come to me, compile them, put them in an interim report. Remember, this is, as Mike just said, this is a 2024 target date, but the interim report does have to be ratified by November 1st. So somewhere between October 15th and November 1st, we meet, look at the report that I will have generated from input from all of you, and then come up with a final version of it at that meeting, which would be the major component of that meeting, and vote on it. And then the interim report would be done. But I think it will also give us guidance on really where we move forward. And the ideas that have come up today have been an education subcommittee, which I think is a great idea. I personally think that, but another one is continuing the digital data subcommittee. None of these, by the way, are exclusive. We just can't have a quorum on any of them. So people who want to participate certainly can, and we can identify those. And if in putting together your thoughts about the interim report, you have an additional subcommittee that you'd like to see, one would be potentially, we did a lot of work, as Katie mentioned, on the chronic disease side, but perhaps having a subcommittee that would be looking on the contaminant side, working with Mike, might be another way to go, rather than going down that rabbit hole of specific contaminants, but being able to think about this from a systems standpoint. Mike, go ahead.
Yeah, and this is not my area of expertise. I just have a sort of procedural or parliamentary question, I guess, is that on another commission that I serve on, we did form subcommittees actually for the same purpose, to kind of develop some content for a final report or for an interim report. And my understanding was that they're official subcommittees. They even though they're not a quorum of the full commission, the subcommittee meetings need to be public and noticed and accessible. Is that correct?
That's correct. Right. Alan's nodding his head. Yes, I guess they are subject. We did that actually when I was chair of the task force in Cancer Cluster Task Force. The subcommittees had to be noticed and publicly accessible. I'm not visualizing us being able to have all these potential subcommittees meet before October 15th. I'm thinking more that this would be something that might be a part of the final report, is to float the idea of these subcommittees as we move forward, especially under the constraint of it being more difficult for all of us to meet going down the road until we're back to in-person meeting. So is there anyone who has more thoughts on the process for the interim report? Okay. So what I propose is that each of us get your thoughts together and to me by October 15th. You can go through Aaron, who is my legislative aide, and Aaron's on the call. Aaron, maybe you can put in the chat your contact information, but you all have his email because he gave you all notice. And then before the next meeting, I will plan to have I'll compile this into an interim report, and then we will meet toward the end of October to really pull this all together into a final report. And as Mindy knows, I like to have lots of input in these things. I don't like to hand it to you. This is all of us coming together. So that's more my style. It sounds a little more chaotic, but I think it's more inclusive too. Is that in fitting with everybody's thoughts, or anybody have an additional comment at this point? Good. Okay. While I have everybody, before we go to vote on the minutes from the last time, just if everybody could pull out their calendars. Are Tuesday mornings pretty good for everybody?
And we do have, you were saying around the 15th of October, we do have that Tuesday, which is the 13th, I believe. Yep, the 13th in the morning is open.
I was thinking that I would say the 15th is the deadline for people to get their submissions to me. I only picked the 15th because it's middle of October, so it doesn't have to be exact, but I was thinking perhaps we could meet the 27th.
That's open as well.
That would give me a little bit of time. Is there anyone who couldn't do 10 to 12 on the 27th? I don't see any hands. Okay, so Alan, if you could put us in for the 27th from 10 to 12,
You got it.
that would be awesome. And the agenda at that meeting is really going to be pulling together that final report for us at the end. Hopefully at the end, we'll do a roll call and say, this is the interim report. And then we can file it. Mindy?
So can I ask then for the, for Katie and Amy for a date we can talk about right now before that to get together and flesh out what we want to talk about and see if it works for Alan? So do
What
we want
works
to,
for- Yeah, Mindy, what days work for you?
how about the 29th at 10 o'clock?
29th
that work?
of September?
September, yeah.
I'm hoping out that
Works
week.
for me. Oh, what'd you say, Amy? Sorry.
I'm hoping to
Amy?
be out that week. Is there something the following week?
October 6th?
October 6th, we have one at 9 o'clock already and then at 1 o'clock.
How long does the 9 o'clock take, Alan?
2 hours. We
So
could
we have
do it
just-
from 11 to 1 if you wanted to.
I can do 11 to noon.
Me too. I think an hour is okay.
Okay.
How should I label this? What should I call this?
This is the data subcommittee? How does that sound?
Yeah, that's great.
Sounds pretty nerdy to me.
That sounds great.
Is there anybody else who wants to participate in that? All right.
And that's
Nancy?
the 6th, correct?
Yes.
So it's the 6th at 11, and Alan or Aaron, can you send out a Zoom for that?
Again.
Yep. Okay.
Thank you.
Did anyone want to get together on the education piece? Dan? How about Margaret? And Jeff? Margaret, her screen has gone blank, so I'm volunteering her. That's what happens when you, and Gary, and Nancy, and Brian, okay, and Mindy.
And just so you guys, I'm going to need the people who want to be included on this. If you can either send your email addresses to Aaron or myself is fine. I just need to know who I'm going to be sending out the panelist invites to for both of these. And obviously when we want to have this second subcommittee.
Okay, so if you want to participate on the data subcommittee, then send your information over to Aaron and Alan. And on the education subcommittee, maybe Dan, would you, or Jeff, do you want to take the lead on that? Who?
Sure.
Okay, so Jeff, what's a date that works for you? Can you do that week, the 29th of September week?
Just a second. This is a very busy time of the year, but
It is.
we take.
Well, the other component, actually, just to throw this out there, if the education, people interested in the education subcommittee, it does not necessarily have to be before the interim report. We could just say we want to form an education subcommittee because this is a crazy time of the year. Would you be okay with that, Brian, Dan, Jeff, Mindy, Nancy? So maybe as part of the report, we put in there that one of our future tasks will be to form that education subcommittee.
Yep.
And
Okay.
then
I'll
there's
just
no,
write a blurb.
right, there's no, that'd be
I'll send
great.
in my email address and I'll just write a quick blurb.
Okay. That sounds great. So we won't have a separate meeting, Alan, until after November.
Okay.
Anything else for preparation for the interim report? Mindy?
I think one of the tasks usually is to recommend policy. So especially with the session starting, probably, bills being filed in January, do we want to come up with some recommendations for policy that come out of this commission?
We could. The reason I wasn't jumping on that was because we've had such a huge gap. And I'm not sure we really got to that point, but certainly as part of the deadline of the 15th, if you want to put in policy recommendations, we can discuss it on our meeting and see if we want to include that in the final report.
Thank you.
I think anything is fair game for the final report, or I'm sorry, the interim report. But we just want to be careful. We're not biting off more than we can chew, especially with the constraints of COVID. Brian has to take off. Thank you, Brian, for your time. Are you able to stay for the vote or do you have to go? Okay. So anything else on the final report? Okay, so let's move to the minutes from January. Everybody has had a chance to look at them. I need a motion to approve.
So moved.
Who was that? Jeff Soloway?
Jeff Salloway.
Second.
Who was that? Brian?
Brian.
Okay. All right, let me call the roll. One sec. Okay. Representative Soloway.
Yes.
Representative Murphy. Nancy?
I believe I was absent at that meeting, so I don't think I can
Okay, you're going to abstain?
abstain.
Okay. Charlie?
Yes.
Representative McMahon?
Yes.
Representative Bradley is absent. Let's see, I have Mike. Are you voting or are you observing? Mike Wimsatt?
I think I can vote on the minutes. I vote yes.
Okay. Dan?
I was absent at that meeting.
Okay. Margaret? Is she back? Okay. Let's see, it's Tulio. Brian?
Yes.
Gary?
Yes.
Bill?
Yes.
I'll vote yes. Katie Bush?
Yes.
Amy Costello?
Yes.
Is it Bob or Robert?
It's actually Abe, but yes.
Oh, wow. Okay. There's a story behind that, I bet. Mindy?
Yes.
Awesome. Okay, so that's everybody. We have 11 in favor, 2 abstain, and 2 absent from the vote. Does anyone have any other business for today? Okay, seeing none. Alan, we do not need to do roll call to adjourn, do we?
Yes, you do.
Okay, that's what I was afraid of. All right. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
A second?
Second.
Amy? I think Amy got in there first. Okay. Let me go back to my list. Representative Soloway.
Yes.
Representative Murphy.
Yes.
Representative McMahon.
Yes.
Mike Wimsatt.
Yes.
Dan.
Yes.
Margaret, are you back on? No. Brian. Mooney.
Yes.
Gary Woods.
Yes.
Bill Nelson.
Yes.
Me, yes. Amy, you already seconded, but you're a yes, I assume. Abe,
Yes.
And Mindy. Mindy?
Yes.
There we go.
And Katie, yes,
And Katie, oh, I'm sorry, Katie.
that's all right. I'll stay in the meeting.
Okay, so thank you all. This was hugely helpful. It's great to see everybody again. We are eagerly awaiting the results of the data team. And we will see you all, what did we say, the 29th?
27th.
27th. See, that's the way I confuse you, just keep you on your toes. The 27th from 10 to 12, and any submissions for the interim report are due on the 15th. Bye, everybody. Thanks for your time.
Thanks,
Bye,
everyone.
guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alan, and thank you, Aaron.